like this. Little pop switch. We go behind the back. Remember that we got a stretch in the morning. Very good. Then we go nice and high. Okay? Nice and high. Little spins, little spins. Double spin.
Fringe is unique,
powerful,
exciting,
an adventure.
I think it's people coming together.
It allows everybody and anybody to have a go.
Even some shows you'll come across and you'll be like, I did not even know there was a market for that show.
The arts have always been there, particularly theatre has always been there for me at the difficult times.
I always have that desire of being a performer, but you're deaf. How are you going to be able to do that?
How can you direct as a blind person?
I simply can't get into the venue.
I've got to look at it, almost assume that I can't get in.
Spontaneity is very difficult within the Fringe.
They had a disabled toilet that was down 2 flights of stairs.
The interpreter is normally put on one side of the stage. I feel like I'm watching a bit of a tennis match.
When I experience these barriers, it makes me feel sad.
Frustrated.
Uneasy.
Deflating.
But sadly not surprised.
Accessibility, it can become part of the artistic process.
It's trying to bridge the gap between the two different worlds, the hearing and the deaf worlds.
What would happen if there was a blind Hamlet or a King Lear who was deaf?
Talk to us, let us know what you already have, and we'll let you know what we need, and we can hopefully meet somewhere in the middle.
I'm Michelle, I'm a producer. I have limited mobility and it's my Fringe too.
I'm Leah, I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm deaf, and it's my Fringe too.
I'm Alison, I'm a director, I'm blind, and it's my Fringe too.
I'm Neil, I'm a musician, I'm a full-time wheelchair user, and it's my Fringe too.
Everyone
has the right
to experience
live performance.
Fringe stands for freedom. The freedom to take part, making a start, telling your story, whoever you are. It's for the risk takers, rule breakers, name makers, artists and audience alike, a place to discover and to be discovered. It's an international showcase, meeting place, creative space where anything goes and the world comes to find it. A global stage made in Scotland. An idea so nonsensical no one could explain it. Copy, own, predict or contain it. A complex design with human heart, ever-changing and state-of-the-art. The Fringe is groundbreaking, mischief-making, shaping conversations but never taking itself too seriously. Its birth was an act of defiance and it will never be shushed. It begins and ends with Edinburgh. Its closes in taverns, venues in caverns, and waiting in line for a show. That feeling of belonging in a crowd of perfect strangers. The Fringe that calls Edinburgh home.
Hello and welcome from wherever you're joining us from in the world today. My name's Alan and welcome to this episode of our Fringe cast. So we're on episode 6 of the season and today we're talking about registering your show. Apologies, as this was supposed to be last week, but unfortunately we had an illness from one of our fearless leaders within the team. So we're bringing to you live today from sunny Edinburgh. So I guess to get the ball rolling, the best thing is to introduce ourselves. So if you're watching live, you can see through the visual medium we have now appeared. So hi, my name's Alan. I'm the registration manager here at the Fringe Society. I'm joined as ever by my technical right-hand man, but you're on my left, Daniel.
Hi, my name's Daniel and I'm the digital marketing coordinator, which means I look after social media, email, and some of the tech behind these Fringecast episodes.
The rest of the tech is being controlled by Leah, who, after a brief cameo on the last episode, we have put off camera once more and off microphone, so apologies, Leah.
Because we've only got 4 microphones and 4 sets of headphones.
We very much appreciate all the work you're doing. The reason we've got 4 microphones is we have 2 guests today, first-time Fringe casters. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name's Hal, and I'm one of the registration supervisors on the team this year.
And I am Maeve, and I am another registration supervisor, but I'm also the Fringe Central Manager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like when you introduce yourself together. I am also one. Great. So, Daniel, are you going to talk us through how do people engage with today's Fringe cast?
Sure. So you're probably watching this live or maybe catching up through YouTube. These Fringe casts are also available as a downloadable podcast, and we'll give plenty of opportunities for you to find that in our plugs at the end.
So many plugs.
But if you are watching it live, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take this opportunity to take a look at the live chat. So if you're on a desktop, it's in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And if you're on mobile, there's a button that says live chat. And that means you can get in touch with us and ask questions as we go. So if there's anything we're talking about and you're not sure what we meant or you want a bit more info, just pop that in the live chat and I'll ask the experts in the room how to do that. In addition, we're doing it live, but you may be watching it back later. If you miss something in the live broadcast, don't worry. It's recorded as we go and it's on YouTube, so you can catch up. And like I said, there's also that podcast edition that you can subscribe to in all the usual places.
Yeah, generally we created these in order to be interactive, so generally we do want to hear from you. It always makes the sessions more fun for us if we've got the odd random question thrown in. And we also like to hear where you're from. I know we already comment that in the field below.
Yeah,
but
so
it's
we've already
always
got
nice.
Lottie from Leeds and Silas from LA. And if you are watching this back later and you can't use the live chat, you can still get in touch with us by email. We have a dedicated email, which is fringecast@edfringe.com.
Yes, it is.
Or you can tweet #FringeCast and we will get back to you as soon as we can.
Great. So, Daniel, what are we going to be talking about today?
Great question. So today we've got a lot to cover in hopefully just sort of under an hour long episode.
Don't worry, Daniel's going to keep me to time. He can kick me under the
They're
desk.
almost always 56 minutes, and I don't know how we do it. So we'll kick off, as we always do, by giving a bit of background about who we are and the ways we could help, and then getting straight to the topic about registration and asking the question, why should you register? Do you need to? Is it compulsory? Once you've decided that you do want to do it, finding out what you need to get started, the technical aspects of our registration system, which is called ep6, which is where Alan, Hal and Maeve just live at this time of year. The information, the information we're looking for as part of that, and a bit of background about why we're asking it. And one area that we do cover is accessibility and the questions that we cover there. Following that, we'll look into some of the ticketing options and the ways you can ticket your Fringe show. We actually cover this in a lot more depth in episode 3 of the series, which is all about what venues are looking for and how to find them. And as part of that, we talk about the different venue models that exist at the Fringe and how the ticketing works. But even if you're committed to a specific venue, there are in some cases still some decisions you can make about how you ticket your show. And then the last 2 bits is about how to keep people in the loop and how to keep in touch. So how you can ensure the right people in your performing company, if you're a group, get the right information from us, because we as an organisation are here to help, and we've got very specific information about the various aspects of bringing a show, but it's probably a lot of information for just one person, so we can show you some of the ways you can split the load up amongst your team and share that advice accordingly.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, cool.
Exciting. This is scary. It's the one that's literally my specialist.
You should be able to answer every question.
I'm feeling pressure. Test me with questions, people. So, registering your show. We're going to start this discussion the way we always do, which is a bit of a talk about the Fringe Society itself. So in case anyone doesn't know, that is us, the organisation that we work for. So the Fringe Society is a charity. It underpins the sort of running of the Fringe. We don't manage, we don't programme. So I guess the important thing to say is that registration isn't about applying or in any way auditioning to be a part of the Fringe. Registration is the process of, once you've found a venue, of telling the Fringe Society, I would like to be a part of the Fringe and be included in the programme, have a listing on your site, and as well as lots of other services which we're going to talk about. But essentially that's something that's not compulsory. Like lots of people maybe think it is or are confused about what the registration process actually means. But when it boils down to it, actually it's your decision to actually be included in the programme, to sign up and say, yeah, I would like my show that's taking place in Edinburgh in August to be part of the Fringe family for that year. I've never described it as a Fringe family before. That's a really fun time to do that for the first time.
And normally we touch upon the fact that as an organisation, we were created in the 50s. The Fringe is just over 70 years old, but we as an organisation came together in the late 50s and was created by the artists of the Fringe to try and make sense of it all and coordinate it and help visitors make sense of it and offer sort of impartial help and advice. And that is our role today. And that registration sort of process and that fee is just sort of your sort of subscription into that service to be part of that family, as Alan has called it on this occasion.
Oh, how very twee we've gotten. Actually, one thing that I think, this may sound like I'm bigging up registration too much because it's my department, but actually, if you think the Fringe Society has 3 main sort of aims or objectives. One is to support artists, 2 is to market the Fringe globally, and 3 is to help audiences understand the Fringe and ticket and be a box office. And actually, registration involves all of those things at its very core. We're there to help you as artists or get the most out of your show and your listing and get started. Also, though, the information you give us helps help audiences. And then the program itself is probably one of the biggest bits of marketing we send out into the world.
No, particularly as in the 2019 program, there's in excess of 3,500 shows. So the information you give as part of the registration process helps to a small extent the audiences narrow that down and navigate it. I say it's no easy task. I'm very much aware of that. But sort of the accuracy and the nature of the information you give at this stage is really important in helping people understand what's on. And then secondly, it builds a buzz about your show and makes people actually want to come and see you.
Totally. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say in this section, so like the Fringe Society and the sort of physical thing of what registration is so often over the years I've communicated with people and they think of it just as that's me paying money to get a show listing in the printed programme.
Like an advert.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, it's the one time the Fringe Society will ever ask you for money unless you're choosing to do paid for advertising, if you want to do some extra advertising in the programme or online. But as a base level, it's the one time the Fringe Society will ask you for any kind of fee. There's a registration fee based on the number of performances that your show has. There's 3 different tiers, but essentially what you're getting for that is, you're getting your listing in the printed programme. You're also getting listed on the website, tickets.edfringe.com. You're getting on the app. If your show is ticketed, it also means our box office will sell tickets on your behalf. And then you're also getting all of the services that we provide to artists, which is a lovely segue into what we're going to discuss next.
It is.
Yeah, agreed. I was wondering, I thought you were going to be like, what are those fees, Daniel? You normally throw a wicked question at me.
They're all listed on the website. I wouldn't test you. Those questions are coming later on.
I know them all, but that's the very thing that will cause extra time. But if anyone has questions, happy to answer. So why register?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's for those very reasons, like it's getting you all of that advertisement. But I really wanted to focus on the services that we provide. And Maeve, I thought this is a nice time to cut to you in your Fringe Central manager role. So what is Fringe Central and what would a participant get from it?
Great question. So I like to see Fringe Central as kind of having 3 facets to it. One of them is the advice services. So we have a set of offices. We transfer all of participant service staff over to Fringe Central. So there's 40 office staff plus working within Fringe Central during the Fringe. And a number of those staff members are available for advice. So there's media advice and artist advice. And you, of course, have done the media advice role before.
Shucks.
And then we've also got our arts industry and media industry where people can come to a credit. So it's also like a meeting place of both participants and industry members. And then we have our event program. So at the moment, call-outs for events are on. I think that finishes in beginning of March 4th. But last year we had 100 events that were all for participant development. And then finally, we have kind of the concourse and the building itself. So there's staff available for part of our reception. There's free Wi-Fi. There's couches. It's also a place to kind of step out of the Fringe and find some peace and quiet.
Yeah, it's considering all it does and all the services you can get there. The thing I tell people most is like, just use it to like have a break.
Yeah.
Like actually, if your accommodation's a little bit further out and you've got that awkward time between like flying and going for dinner or your show, actually being able to just have somewhere fairly central where you can like just crash for a bit and like just maybe quietly answer some emails or meet other participants, like other people. Like I hope, Silas and Lottie appear to already be like chatting in the comment section, like meeting other artists and kind of finding the people who are going through the same kind of journey as you. I think is a really important thing of Fringe Central.
Yeah, and I guess that's the beautiful thing is that coming in there that it's common ground. Everyone who's going to be in that building is going to be there for that reason and for a common reason. So it is a really open and accessible place to come and meet new people.
And it's open every day. It starts at the Monday before the Fringe begins until the day the Fringe ends. Every day from 10 till
8 p.m. Yes.
Every day. And you can cut, and there's bean bags and everything. It's a really, really good place just to relax. And
I definitely got stuck in one of those bean bags once. It was too comfortable.
Yeah.
It was the middle of the Fringe, and I was like, well, I'm not
leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, so generally what we want to do there is kind of let you know everything you're getting with that registration fee. So your listing is probably the thing that's forefront in your mind at the moment, but actually it's a gateway to lots of services and lots of help. As Maeve said, I have run the media advice service before, and there's kind of nothing more heartbreaking sometimes than when someone comes in and they want your help, but they aren't a registered show. And as much as you want to help, you're like, there's people, it's a really oversubscribed service, and there's people who have paid the registration fee who need that help. We don't do like a big hard sell, but I would just say if you think those services appeal to you and that's what your goals are from the Fringe of what you want to gain from the whole experience, then I think registering.
In a similar vein, you get the same issue if someone only comes and talks to us, say at the end of the Fringe, and actually we realise if we'd had a conversation in February or March, we could have unlocked doors or sorted things out. So in addition to the media advice and the artist development advice, we are here as an impartial advisor. If anything, you need any help or support, we've been around for decades. There's no such thing as a silly question. So just ask us, and we're here to help.
Yeah, a famous Fringe cast mantra is with the Fringe, you don't know what you don't know yet. So a lot of times you're listening in because you're like, I think I know what I'm doing, and then suddenly you're like, oh, what's public liability insurance? Which is always my example because I didn't have it until like 2 days before the Fringe, the first time I brought a show.
But by listening to these, you're
taking if only Fringe casts had existed back then, and I could somehow have told myself about public liability insurance, that would have been fab. I kind of wanted to take the moment now to just do a slight pause because we're about to go into like quite the sort of technical nitty gritty of registering your show. So there may be people listening who are like, oh, I thought I was applying for my venue through the Fringe or something similar. If you're in that kind of situation and you're worried about, oh, how do I find a venue? We've actually got a whole host of episodes so far this season, which Daniel appears to be selecting out the corner of my eye. So I don't know if you're going to pop something in a chat.
If you're watching the live version, we'll share a link to it. But if you're listening to the podcast edition, you'll see the other episodes that we've had this season where we cover the specific topics such as finding a venue or budgeting your show, or some of the things you need to consider if you're bringing a show from outside the UK.
Cool. So that's totally just like a little plug to be like, listen to those and then come back and listen to this because it's going well.
Right.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Wow, I brought that to a halt. Cool. So we've got what registration is and like why you should register. Hal, what do you need in place before you register?
So I suppose most crucially, you want to have an agreement with a venue in place before you come and try and register with us.
That's correct. Well done.
Sometimes, thank you. Pass the test.
I didn't warn them I was going to ask that question.
I think one of the most common problems that companies have when they get to the registration point is submitting a registration form, believing that that's an application to take part and that we can provide venues. Other than Fringe Central, I believe this is right, we don't run any venues. So it's really important that you've got that in place. And we do have a team, the participants team, who are very happy to help you find one should you be at a loss.
In addition to that, if you just search the Fringe venue, search the Fringe venue search tool, we have an online.
Easy for you to say.
We have an online system that helps you filter what venues are available, and depending when you listen to this episode, you'll either get the current one or the brand new one, which will be released sometime because there are a lot of venues and spaces, and it's worth giving a bit of context because we haven't mentioned it yet. So you can pick your own venue. That last year there was over 350 venues, and within those venues there are multiple spaces. So last year there was over 1,000 unique spaces in which shows took place. So you should be able to find one, but you need to find one before you try and register the show.
That's crucial.
It feels like a good time to drop the email that we always drop, which is participants@edfringe.com. If you take one thing from this whole session, that's probably a good email address to take, mainly because they're kind of like the front line for participant services. They can basically answer anything, and if not, they can find you the answer and point you in the right direction. So they're really good. And basically, they're the team that handle everything pre-registration. So if you think of it like I was going to say a relay race, but I'm not. I never made the relay back in school. But like, you know, I really am allowed to take part in. And the baton passes from their team to registration when you're ready to roll. I would say it's also really important, securing that venue is to then talk to your venue and figure out how registration will work. Because essentially we're going to talk in a little bit about Ed Fringeware, which is where all shows eventually end up, but every venue will have their own unique way of registering. There's at least sort of 5 or 6 different ways someone could register, so the information ends up in the same place, but as each venue is differently, there's kind of all those different routes. So it's really important at the start, especially if you find yourself near to some of our deadlines, that you know exactly where you're supposed to be registering. I just realised we haven't talked about our deadlines yet, and that's probably a pretty good point.
So here's the proper test. So what are, for registering a show in the printed programme to start with, what deadlines are there?
Daniel, I know the fees off my heart, and you asked me the deadlines. So there's two. So I guess the most important one is the deadline for being included in the printed programme. So that is 5 p.m. GMT or BST.
BST.
So that's UTC plus 1.
And that is on Wednesday, the 8th of April. I'm looking to you for confirmation. And
do you want me to double check?
Yeah,
I'm with you.
Hal's confirmed, that's correct. So yeah, 5 p.m. Wednesday, the 8th of April is the last time you can register and be included in the printed programme. However, if you're doing a full run, which we say is 6 or more performances, and you're keen to save pretty much £100, I mean, that's a bargain, who wouldn't want to? We have what we call like our early bird discount deadline, and that is 5 p.m. GMT on Wednesday, the 11th of March.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's just an and I said that that's a sort of that discount is a sort of an extra thank you for getting it in early to make the lives of this team slightly easier, because there are thousands upon thousands of shows registering to join the Fringe, and the team is, how many of you are there?
10 altogether.
Yeah, there will be. We're currently a 3. We will soon, in just over a week, we'll be a 10. So that's very exciting.
So the better we can spread
Hello
out
to our team if you're listening.
as a thank you for helping us like spread that load out, there's a discount for getting in early. So if you can do that, go ahead. But if not, don't panic that you can't. But what if you can't make the deadline for the printed programme?
Yeah, so lots of people, well, not lots, but some people find the time of, actually, I've confirmed late, I've missed that deadline for whatever reason. We actually reopen registration right at the end of May. Sort of, it's normally the last Monday of May, depending on sort of getting everything ready for programme. But we reopen for online and app-only registration. And the fee goes back down from, so a full run being £39,360. The discounted rate is £295.20. And that's the rate that we also use for those online-only registrations.
Okay.
I'm so proud that I remembered those.
Yeah, that sounded great.
Nobody looked suitably impressed.
So you talked about the fact that there are lots of different ways shows are registered, but ultimately that information ends up in a Fringeware.
Yeah.
So you talk to your venue to establish how that is. So the venue says you have to register your own show. What's the next step?
Yeah, so I think first we wanted to establish the kind of pause for a second and think about the volume of information that you're going to need when you register. Because I would say it's often more, I think you guys probably learning from this too since sort of starting with the team, that people are often caught off guard by how much information we require.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, even though this might feel like a really early stage in the process, the information that you give now is essentially the information that will carry you right through to the end of the festival. So any relevant information as that relates to perhaps your industry or touring information, which you might not know at this point, all of that kind of what might seem superfluous stuff will carry all the way through. So if you know that now or as early as you can, that's great.
Yeah, and make sure, I think, before you start, you've got that information to hand. I would say the forum is really quite responsive in terms of you can save a lot along the way, but you're going to be asked lots of different bits of information. So you want to check that either you've kind of got many heads on it at the team, or that one person who's doing it is really fully briefed on all of the information they're going to need. One thing we always say, actually, we advise on a number of different things when you're deciding on coming to the Fringe. But I think it's really important when you're registering, have a look at last year's programme. Like, genuinely, that is such a great resource for seeing what worked, what didn't. Like, for example, when it comes to picking your image, you could almost let the programme fall open on any page and see images that work versus the ones that don't. It's the easiest way to see it. Remember that image is going to be really small when it's in print, so actually crowding it with lots of information is really difficult. Whereas if something is simple and really relates to the show, it tends to work really well. But if you suddenly look at a double page spread of those images, the ones that work just sing out at you.
And you can go to our website to download a PDF edition of the 2019 Fringe programme. You can't get them on our website because the shows listed at tickets@edfringe.com are already some of the first shows who are super keen and definitely made the early bird deadline. They're already listed on our website.
111 shows.
And if you're listening back, it may be, who knows, past the 1,000 mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess like we've been dancing around the subject, but Ed Fringeware, as you were saying, is our registration software. Legendary it is in the Fringe gamut world. As Daniel said, not everyone will go straight to Ed Fringeware. Some venues use a system called Eventdrom, which eventually ends up with us. Some systems may have their own kind of spreadsheet or application form, but wherever that information starts, it ends up in Ed Fringeware. And that's just at registration.edfringe.com. And basically what it is an online platform where you can give us all the information about your show. But it's also something that stays with you. So you create a user on that, and then that can stay with you year after year after year. I think, Maeve, you're a good one to chat about this because you're probably the newest in the room to Ed Fringeware. About the different levels of how it works. What's that like coming into as a beginner? Because it's not necessarily what you think it's going to be.
It can be very confusing. This is a good test for me as well. So you come in and you create your user, which is you as an individual.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about your organisation or your show at this point. It's just you as your user in Ed Fringeware. And then your next step in moving on is to create your organisation.
Yeah.
Which may not be you a personal user. You may have a different account, different payout details, different contact details altogether, but you as the user are attached to that.
Yeah, I just to jump in, I think something people get really confused at this stage is they think they have to be a registered company.
Because of the way we use companies to refer to the performing group. That
you might just be, because if you are just, hi, I'm Alan and my organisation is Alan. I'm just
tell me more about the show.
Yeah, I'm just a flautist that turns up. That is my organisation is me. Then that's absolutely fine. But you have to make that step of you're a user in Ed Fringeware, but then an organisation is what a show can be attached to, because a show can't attach to a single person. And if you get your head around that step, I think you're up and running. Are you imagining me being a flautist?
I don't know if it's the right time, but we had a question that came in from Anne who asked, you have these deadlines, you have the early bird deadline and that printed programme deadline. So how long before that deadline should they register the show to allow for the process of proofing? So how are the rounds of amends, and what's the sort of the conversation between the artist and the Fringe Society? How does that work?
How long is a piece of string? I think you once said, Hal, that if it was a case of just we read each show once, sent off a proof and they approved it, program would be really easy.
Yeah, we'd be done in a week. But no, the conversation extends. I mean, once you're registered with us, we give an average of 10 working days to turn around the show and get it back to you, so you can have a look at it once we've proofed it. And by proofing, we kind of mean looking over it to make sure that it meets all of our style guide. I don't want to say restrictions because that sounds a bit mean, but style guide standards.
You're right, though. It's not just, I think a lot of people think we're just proofing your copy and checking for spelling, whereas actually we're checking, is this show viable? Does it work? Do the concessions make sense? Is it conflicting with itself in terms of timelines? We're kind of looking at it as a whole, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we're checking things like your ticketing models and whether that makes sense at your venue. We're checking any information about the accessibility of your show that you've given us. That's why, and basically everyone's show is read twice, so it gets an edit by 2 members of the team, which is why it can sometimes take a while to turn around. But in terms of those sign-offs, they happen pretty much monthly, depending on when you would like your show to be revealed to the world.
So specifically, if you're trying to make an actual deadline, say the early bird deadline, how complete is your registration? Does it have to go through multiple rounds of proofing? What do you have to hit to get into that deadline?
Yeah, so I'd say there's 2 different kinds of deadlines. So the deadline that Anne was talking to, I think, about the discounted one or the main deadline, that all you need to do is have given us all of your information. So you can't have
first
left
time
anything.
round.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're just giving us anything that's starred, anything that's mandatory. You have to just have given that. It doesn't have to be the very finished model. Like, so you don't have to have an image then if it's not ready. Your copy can be mostly right, but tweakable. We don't let people just whitewash completely. Like, if someone just does TBC, they get a quite stern email from myself. But at that point, all you have to do is give us the information. It can edit and tweak.
Because we know that as you preview or prepare, there's little refinements you need to make.
Totally.
But you need to get that initial submission in.
It has to be the form, it has to be fundamentally the show that's going to be on in August. You can't suddenly get to June and be like, oh, I actually don't want to play the flute anymore. I'm going to play the cello. Because that's quite different.
So if you're unsure about the instrument you're going to play, maybe you register a show with a fairly generic title.
Exactly. Whereas the other deadlines you meet, which we call like sort of sign-offs, is you've received a proof back from us, and it's you going over that and being like, I am happy. And then you have two options. You can either approve it for the next show reveal, and if it's ticketed, like for the next on sale, which we roughly have one a month, essentially. And then after you do that, your venue approves it, good to go. Or you can say, no, I'm going to hold off until program launch and not reveal your show, keep it a secret until program launch.
I imagine it's going to be similar to your answer about how long a piece of string is. But how does that differ if you're going through your venue, for example? Those sort of timelines. Is it just one that every case is different?
Yeah, so actually we've got really good relationships with the venues. They're very much our friends through the process. So we kind of are communicating with them the same way. So it's really important to talk to your venue because they will be working to deadlines, but they may have specific ones. So there are some venues I know that their policy is all the shows go on sale at program launch. It's the way they've always worked. It's how they like doing it. It's what they plan their marketing and media stuff around. They go at program launch. There's others that were like, we're not going to go until discount deadline. Then we're going to do a batch, and then we're going to do a second batch around the main deadline kind of thing. But generally, if you want your show to be on sale or revealed at a certain time, just talk to your venue, because if they're registering your show, they'll let you know what's possible. And if you're ever worried about a certain date or reaching it, and because that 10 working days is very vague deliberately, because if you send in your show on the discount deadline versus 2 weeks before it, those are very different times for our office. So there's times where if you email us and be like, hey, I've just registered, I'm really keen to make, like, our next deadline is Monday, company sign off for our shows going on sale at the end of February. And at that point, if you email us and be like, I know it's a bit tight, is it possible? Chances are we can be like, cool, we'll have a look and try and get it back to you. And depending on how much back and forward there is, we can get it sorted. Whereas if there happens to be like 1,200 proofs waiting, it's much harder to be like, cool, we'll jump you to the front of the queue.
I have a question. It's in the general area of registration, but it's slightly different to what we were going to cover today. And it's a question from John, who asks that he has a show at a venue, in one venue for weeks 1 and 2, that then shifts to a different venue for week 3, but it's the same show.
Yeah.
So how would he go about registering that? Does he have to register it more than once?
No, he does not. In fact, we wouldn't allow him to. We've got a thing called one show, one listing, which basically means a show can only list once, no matter how many venues or iterations it goes through. So what John, was it?
Yes.
What John would do, hi John, is register the show, and there's things what we call datelines, which is basically when you tell us when the show's on, and you give like your venue information, any ticket information, times, dates. So basically you have to make one of those every time one of those bits of information changes. So, for example, if John's moving venue, he would have one dateline for when he was in one venue, and then another if the time changes or if he moves venue. Similarly, some shows like to be more expensive at the weekend and cheaper during the week. That would mean you have a dateline for the weekend and then one for during the week.
And you said one show, one listing. So how do you define what a show is? So imagine I've got two shows that are sort of similar, but their titles are different. I mean, how do you make that decision?
It's sort of really difficult. It's kind of up to you what it is. Generally, the rule is we say, if you can describe the show within your 40-word program copy and have it be succinct and make sense, chances are you've got one show that works. If it starts to get more complicated and you're trying to define out, basically from your listing, I shouldn't be able to go, oh, I want to go on that day, and then I want to go on that day because I'm going to get a different experience. You should be able to think like, no matter when I go, I'm going to get the same experience, even if that's maybe like a different act, so to speak. So a really good example is assembly of a show called Whose Line Is It Anyway that comes every year. And you'll notice in the programme, they normally have a line that says, for full listings, see, and then a website. So they wouldn't be allowed to go, you get this comedian on a Friday, but you get this comedian on a Tuesday, because that's then essentially getting more than one bite of the cherry. Whereas we let them go, this is an event that happens, there's a mixed lineup. If you want more information, check out our website.
Whereas if you had a play that had 2 parts, and part 1 was on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and part 2 was on Tuesday, Thursday.
We already have a show like this, yeah.
So is that 2 listings?
Yeah, that's very much 2 listings. People have tried to make it work as one, where they've tried to be like, oh, it's got different parts, whereas actually they realised, do you know what, it's much better to just pay the 2 registration fees and have it be really clear that on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays you're going to get part 1, and on Tuesday the dates I didn't say.
And they'll sit next to each other in the programme and you'll get twice.
Yes, absolutely.
It makes it a lot easier, because one of our jobs is to make it easier to understand the Fringe. The Fringe is very complicated, and something like this is just a small step to make it make some sense.
Do you know, you've also hit on something that I think, I don't know if you guys agree, that I think you've hit on the main sort of, can be frustration, but the main sort of complication of registration, which is our policies and our rules and how everything works has to work for those like practically 4,000 shows. And in order to do that, we need to have those policies and stuff. So if it ever gets frustrating when you're filling out that form, being like, why? It's just me and a stool and my flute. Like, why? Why are you asking me all these things? All I'd say is like, we hear you. Send us a little email. Vent at us all you want, but just know that those questions are there because actually the 52-piece circus who's coming from international has to tell us that information because they need it.
But also you don't know what you don't know, and so a lot of that information might not feel particularly relevant at this point, but then further down the line you'll be glad that you've supplied that to us earlier on, because it'll help you in the long run.
Yeah, actually it's a really good point of like, if we're asking something and you're a bit like, why are you asking? I wasn't expecting you to ask that. Think about maybe why we're asking it, because chances are there's little help bubbles in Ed Fringeware if that's how you're registering, and it kind of tells you what we're looking for in the answer, but also why we're asking it, and it might actually just make you go, oh, I hadn't thought about.
So speaking of it, is now a good time to look at one of those examples, so maybe accessibility.
Then I have to talk less, so that'd be great. Hal,
Yes.
accessibility on the Fringe. What do we ask people in Ed Fringeware?
So when you're registering a show, you'll see one of the tabs is show accessibility. And in that tab, you can specify if you're planning to do any enhanced performances. So that would cover, I think we ask for 5 different types. And I'm going to try
You've
and
really
go
set
through those
yourself up.
5.
Yeah.
Here we go.
All 5.
Okay. Captioned performances.
Yes.
Relaxed performances. Touch tours.
I thought you were saving that one for last.
Which is the new one, FYI. We have audio described.
I don't know why I did a little ASMR.
Feel free to chip in, everyone.
There's one to go.
There's one to go.
The one you've been sending the most emails about. We've been trying to sign you up for one.
Oh.
No, he said relaxed.
No, I've said relaxed performances.
Oh.
Is it BSL?
Oh, yeah. Signing. Yes, right.
Sorry, we've somehow turned this into a quiz, which probably isn't helpful to listeners.
Yeah, that wasn't a very useful segment there.
So, audio described, BSL, captioned, relaxed, and touch tour.
Cool.
And if you're from outside the UK, BSL is British Sign Language.
Yes.
And actually, that's a good point. So within that, one of the things you ask is which sign language you'll be. So whether it's International Sign, ASL, BSL, or Makaton.
And if you're not sure what any of those things are, it's another area in which we have a team that's here to help and advise. And if you're listening to this podcast early in the year, then it's still a good time to get in touch and see if there's any way you could adapt your whole run or even a specific performance to make it more accessible and incorporate one of these accessible performances.
Absolutely, and I would encourage everyone to do it and to think about it. But I would also encourage you, if you're thinking about it, to plan before you register. Because a lot of the time when people register, they'll get to that section of the form and be really excited by the possibilities of that, which is great, but only learn about that as a possibility at that point. And then it becomes a long conversation with us about kind of working out if companies have actually planned that kind of performance. Whereas we're super happy to have that conversation and help you work out how to do that and accommodate for that. But try and think about it before you register, I would say.
In fact, we'll make you have that conversation. Like, it's the one thing in the forum that you will get an email from us, probably from Hal, being like, you've told us you're doing a relaxed performance. We need to check that you fully understand what that means, what comes with it, what enhancements or changes, adaptations you've made to your show. And we have that conversation because we've got that commitment to the audience. Like, if we don't want you to just sort of say you're doing one thinking that, I've got a really chilled out approach. It's much more than that. So actually, it's the one time we will, and not in a type of way that we're policing anything. It's completely up to you, but it's us being like, I guess, like a last check of like, are you sure? Have you fully understood what this means? Something, it sounds really harsh to say, but it's one part of the form. It's absolutely not mandatory so you can answer no to everything and then come back at any time and change your mind. So I would rather that people say, no, I'm not doing one if you're not sure, and then absolutely email us in a month and be like, we've sorted it. I am now doing one. We ask people to be really honest and precise when they're filling in the access information. We have 2 questions that are a really good example that we brought in for the first time last year, which is we're asking around how suitable is your show without any enhancement to either deaf and hard of hearing audiences or visually impaired and blind audiences. And we get lots of people, for example, who have really great intentions because they say, I absolutely want a blind person to be able to access my show. That's not what we're asking. We're asking, without anything, without any kind of adaptation from you, can a blind person come and get the full experience of your show? And there's a difference there.
And while it's amazing if you're making these decisions and thinking about it at this stage, we understand that due to the nature of production, that may not always be the case. And while we do have all these deadlines that apply to print, and they are immovable because we can't just change when things are printed, if down the line you realise that you've registered your show and you say you haven't got an accessible performance, and then you find a way that it is actually going to happen, it is still possible to make changes that are reflected on the website and the app, so people can still filter what's on and see that actually this weekend there is a captioned performance of a show I want to see, and they can book accordingly.
Yeah, and it may be good to also mention the Access Bookings team in relation to this, who can kind of assist audiences that might want to see these kinds of shows. And this information that you provide about your shows at this point is crucial for them to help audiences access those shows. So, and obviously, if you don't know that now and you say no at this point, even if, like Daniel says, if you say yes further down the line, that then still filters to this team who can help those audiences.
The same thing applies to that warnings field as well, as including information that is relevant.
Absolutely. So one of the fields that Daniel was talking about there is like we ask about sensitive content in your show that ranges everything from like strobe lighting to swearing, will the audience have to walk kind of thing, but also around like themes you're using. And I would say people often, like when I was in my media advice role, they would often ask about, I don't know, I'm worried about spoilers and things. I wouldn't worry about that when you're doing your sensitive content because we keep them vague enough that it's not massively like giving away like plot points, but the people who would need to know that information will know what they're looking for, kind of thing. And it's really important. Like it's a running joking podcast that I've done a Fringe show before.
Have you now?
Yeah, but genuinely, like when I did my first one, I don't know if I fully thought about all the because you're so involved in like creating your show and getting it out there, and it's such a big thing to take to the Fringe. But then I was speaking to audiences after the show who, like, thankfully were like really nicely moved by it, but like it massively was dealing with like grief and bereavement. And I kind of had put no warnings on that, which now I definitely, like 10 years later, I would now be like, whoa, actually, people need to know that before going in. So yeah, I think like that's all the things. Like when we're asking to register, this is what we mean by it's so much more than a listing. It's actually like the full aspect of your show.
And it is complicated, and that's why it's important to have a dialogue and getting in touch. And if any of these things don't make sense, that's fine. Like if someone walked in for the first time and understood that entire form, I'd be worried.
Yeah.
Like I don't know who is this person?
Yeah. Do you want a job?
Yeah.
So I think that's touched upon accessibility.
Yeah.
There are so many different avenues that we could cover on that, but just time is against us.
Yeah.
So what should we look at next?
So ticketing was the last sort of specific thing we wanted to talk about. Just because ticketing and sign up, we've covered a lot about signing off already actually, but this is something that I think people dive in and don't fully get this, and it's a part that people are really excited about, but like there's lots of different questions you'll be asked around discounts that you might want to be a part of, or schemes you might want to allocate tickets to. You're gonna have to decide how much you want your tickets to be, which some people don't know. Like quite often we get emails or phone calls being like, how much should my tickets be? And then we feel really unhelpful because we're like, how much do you want them to be? And they're like, I don't know, what should they be? And that's when we say things like resources like last year's programme are really, really great. Talking to your venue is really, really great because they're going to know like, oh, I'd go in the Fringe Friends scheme because you're a new show, they take more risks, they talk and get word of mouth going. That first Monday and Tuesday, the 2-for-1 days, we think your show would be good in one of them, but maybe you won't need to do the two. Like, talk to people and look at shows similar to yours, and think really carefully about how you want to pitch your show. You kind of want to find a show that's on. You don't want to price people out of the market, kind of thing.
And you were saying, look at last year's program. In addition to that, look at the program, see who the performing companies were or the solo artists were, and just get in touch with them. You'll find their social media info. You know from your own experience, artists love to tell their stories and what the journeys they've been to and things they've learned. And the best person to talk to is the person who's gone through exactly the same process.
Yeah, and I would say like keep it simple. If you're a first timer or if you're new to sort of the Fringe landscape, I would keep it as simple as possible. Like if your venue doesn't have a say and they're kind of open, I'd kind of err on the side of caution. I'd maybe go like less ticket value than you maybe would elsewhere. Like maybe in your hometown you charge a tenner because you've got like a good sort of fan base that people like you maybe want to bring it down to £8. I got a great bit of advice when I first did it. This made me sound a bit capitalist. The producer I was working with was like, if you were going to go for £8, just go for £8.50. And I was like, why? I've settled on £8. And he was like, no one's going to grudge 50p. And I was like, oh. And he generally, at the end, I counted up what all those 50p has got. And I was like, oh, I'm a bit less poorer.
And it looks like you've had some really in-depth strategy.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, it's very smart.
Yeah, no. I once tried to claim that as mine. I was like, no, someone told me that was a good idea once.
Because time isn't on our side, we can't really go into the specifics of free shows or ticketed and non-ticketed. But like we said at the top, go check out episode 3, which is all about the different types of venues and the models that exist.
The one I'll really say massively quickly is pay what you want. There's a question about that. If you don't know what pay what you want is, and your venue hasn't mentioned it, you probably shouldn't be in the scheme. So just drop us an email and check out, or just click no. We might change your show for you if you've said that you pay what you want, but then your pricing structure doesn't make sense and your venue would normally do that. We might come back and be like, we're not sure you meant that.
But on ticketing, super quickly, any advice about comps and allocations for media or for whoever you... I don't know what the fields are.
Yeah.
What are the options?
So if you're a ticketed show, you'll get the option to allocate to the media and also to the industry. So the media to come and generally to review your show, and generally the industry are looking for like work to buy or work to support, people to develop after the Fringe. We recommend there's a sort of default value of 4 to media and 2 to industry. You can make that whatever you want, but those are our defaults for a reason. They're pretty good. I would say that's on a per performance basis. We get some people that are like, oh, I want to do like 40. And we're like, they've counted up for the full run. A term I always use, and I don't know if it's bad because I don't know if everyone knows what it means, but it's ring fencing, which basically means your tickets wouldn't be ring fenced. So if you put comps aside, that basically means they don't leave the pot of tickets that you're selling from. It just means that if a member of the media, accredited member of the media, went to our media office and requested tickets, if you had tickets left in your pot, they could take one of up to 4. And if that
Is that the case
if
in
that
all?
makes sense.
Is that the case for every venue, or are there different policies?
Yeah, so like for anyone who's getting tickets through the Fringe media office,
Okay.
there may be people, if your venue tells you to allocate 0, it's because maybe they're allocating
They do it for you
their
instead.
own.
So again, it goes back to the earlier point of just check with your venue what the situation is.
Just check with your venue generally about comps, because some venues you might just be on a straight hire and they don't really care about your comps. As far as they see it, they're your tickets. Do what you like with them. But if your venue has a stake in your tickets, so if you're on a box office split or anything like that, you should 100%, like, 1, look at your contract because comps are probably in there, but 2, speak to your venue, because genuinely that venue relationship is really, really important and you want it to be good. And the only thing that makes venues, that relationships sour, is when people are not communicating. So they're like, what, my venue's telling me I can't offer this comp or I have to pay for it. And they were a bit like, well, we told you that months ago, kind of thing. So if there's anything I can say about that, it's please just talk to your venue and think through what you want to do. There's a new thing for the arts industry side. You are asked to name an arts approver, which is essentially if you're making tickets to the industry available, that's the person who will get regular emails asking to approve or deny someone who's requested a ticket.
And we'll cover that in more depth in a future episode.
Yes.
But it links perfectly to our penultimate topic, which is keeping the right people in the loop and how we can talk to different members of your performing company so people aren't overwhelmed with information.
Yeah, I'd say it's fundamentally important. Like for me, for Fringe Central, people turning up and getting the right information, it's just massively important.
Very important, yeah. And I guess, like I said earlier, it's that place that is the meeting of the two industries in a way.
Yeah.
And I know for, our media office and our arts industry office do put their industry members, they have to apply. They're accredited. It's not just anyone who can come in and get these tickets. But I also know how key it is for those teams to have the right information for the participants so they can also best service the participants and make those matches happen.
And you know what? We talked about all the services the Fringe Society provides, which are great, but you won't know about them if we can't tell you.
Yeah.
So there'll be certain times we'll go to your primary contact because that's the number one person that we're going to because there's something that we need to do your show. Whereas our media team will always go to the media contact to be like, this journalist is really keen to interview you, kind of thing. And if those aren't up to date, trust me, in August, inboxes can be a terrible thing. But they become a terrible thing if you're not on top of it or the wrong person. It might be a thing of, we need an image for you because we're going to run a review. If that's going to the wrong person who left your company because you had a fight back in May about what the costumes were going to be for your show, then they're probably not going to let you know that the Scotsmen need an image for you. And then, sort of really quickly, there's something fairly new to the forum this year. It used to be in a different place and it's been adapted, but it's called the company list. Now, you can amend this at any time, so you don't have to have it fully ready when you register, but I would encourage you to go in. And basically, this means if you're the one registering your show, that's great. We love you. You're kind of like the gatekeeper of your show. However, our services don't apply just to you. They apply to... I always go kids show for this. I'm always like, the guy playing tree number 6, the person making the costumes, whoever's doing the lights. You know what? You're all valid, Fringe artists, Fringe participants, and our service is available to all of them, not just the person who filled in the form. And the company list is your way of letting us know that person's email and their role within the company. So as things like the Fringe Central events that Maeve was talking about, we'll email writers to say, hey, Playwright Studio are doing something to do with playwriting. So yeah, fill that in, please.
So that's how we can get in touch with you. But you can also get in touch. That's how we kind of wrap these up.
I'm just looking at the clock and we're wrapping up at, oh my God, I'm so proud of us.
Don't worry, we'll still run over time. So we mentioned it.
It's a warning to get your questions in now, people.
We mentioned this early on, but if you, at this phase, before you're registering your show, the go-to email address is participants@edfringe.com. There is no such thing as a ridiculous question. We've been asked everything, but just don't keep it to yourself. Ask us, and the sooner you ask, the earlier we can help.
I feel at the same time we should give our email address. So if you're ready to go and you're registering, anything to do with the registration process, the information in the form, or how your show looks in itself, to program@edfringe.com.
And if you want to get in touch with us about these Fringe casts, whether you have any suggestions, because ultimately these episodes are for you, to help you through the journey of bringing a show to the Fringe. So we need to hear from you. If there's something you'd like us to cover, get in touch. Or if you've been listening back and there was something you weren't sure about and you want us to point you in the right direction of it, just email fringecast@edfringe.com. You can also catch us on social media, just following us at Fringe Central on Twitter or Instagram, and they're our artist-focused channels. We'll be talking about Fringe casts, how the team go on the road, and as we get nearer August, we'll be showing the wonderful world of Fringe Central and all the events we have going on. Finally, if you enjoyed Fringe cast, please do tell people you're performing with or fellow artists, either face-to-face or by tweeting with the hashtag FringeCast.
Yeah, spread the word far and wide. And while you're doing that, I would like you to say a special thank you to Daniel, because this is Daniel's last Fringe cast, and that makes me sad. Daniel helped invent Fringe casts. He's one of the reasons why they're even a thing now. But Daniel was leaving us for pastures new. So I didn't tell him I was going to do that. So yeah, if everyone could, who has enjoyed a Fringe cast, say nice things about Daniel on social media, that would make me very happy.
I think I've done 47 episodes to date, but it's
Didn't
not
that 50th one, did you?
But the 50th one is coming. It's not going to end when I walk out the room later today. We've got a lot more episodes to come. We're going to have a wee break in between these two halves of the season, because everything we've covered so far is about the process of thinking about bringing a show, finding a venue, and how to register your show. And then looking ahead, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of actually doing it and the process of coming to Edinburgh. I say we, it's you guys. So what are you guys going to cover?
So we've got things from introduction to marketing, engaging the media, music licensing, accessibility, sustainability, and social media. That one's going to hurt, Daniel. It's your favourite one.
And as we said before, this is available on YouTube and as a podcast, so pick whatever format suits you best. You can catch up with episodes from earlier this season, and indeed we've been doing this for a couple of years. So if you just can't wait to hear some advice on social media, you can go and get that from I'm very impartial. The episode's fine. You can catch that as well. So do listen, do share, and I think that is pretty much it for this week.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much for all of your questions. That properly kept us on our toes. Thank you to Maeve and Hal for your first time Fringe cast. Excellently done. Thank you to Leah for keeping us going, and a big thanks to Daniel for all 47 Fringe casts today. Was this 47 or 40?
This is number 47.
Cool.
So, thank you for being here and keeping it all happening and being the host.
I even dressed like a hedge for you. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. Keep in touch and good luck on your Fringe journey.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.